alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a returning guest, R Max Tillsley. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks very much, Tim.
Well, it's great to have you back. I mean, we've been bullshitting off mics for a little bit, so, but maybe I should say this show is an explicit tag, but today we're talking about a book that's a little more family friendly, perhaps. Brains. What's your book? Is Choose Your Own Adventure, right?
Oh, now.
You can't say that. You can't say that.
Warning.
I forgot that's trademarked.
There. So, as Amazon would categorize it, it's called an interactive adventure. Sometimes also called a game book, a branching past adventure, or like role playing if you're doing it by yourself.
Okay, so it's not that trademarked thing I said before. Sorry about that.
That's right. I'm just outside. I see lawyers with pitchforks and briefcases, so I'm just being careful.
Well, keep your sword handy. Anyway, so what's Brains about?
So Brains is it's set in a museum in an unnamed city. You are a student that's gone along from some sort of outer town, and you're there for your usual sort of excursion, but it all goes wrong, and it's a setup so you have to choose how you react, where you're going to go, what sort of people you're going to go with. Are you going to hide? Are you going to try and make a difference? And there's a lot of moral choices, there's a lot of high-risk choices, and there's a lot of fun that's sort of involved in that. You can find yourself in a zoo, at an airport, police stations, all sorts of spots. One of my favorite is if you end up inside a theater with some friendly clown zombies. And I don't know. I feel sorry for people who are clowns as a career path. But they just freak me out. So zombie clowns, yeah, that's where it is.
Well, zombie clowns has got to be. It just takes me back to it. We all float down here.
Absolutely, and it is that creep factor, which is fantastic. I think the whole zombie idea. You have something that looks human, that looks like it should be normal, but just isn't. It has, either a malevolence or an utter indifference to your humanity. And when you have a clown face, it's got an expression that's painted on it. And so what the real expression of the person behind it is, what they're really feeling, you can't tell. And I think that creates a bit of a discomfort within us. And I think some of that replays in zombie stories, and when you have like one of my other books, Rebirth, when you're looking at robots who are, for all apparent purposes, human. Again, you just have that feeling of it's not quite right.
Yeah, the uncanny, as they say.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Though we've talked about all these different sort of things. My favorite thing, though, in there is I do have a zombie hippo.
Which is on the cover,
it's
too.
Not the clowns that made the cover. It's the zombie hippo. And I found this perfect hippo for it. And everyone who looks at it just has to say, I've got it for the zombie hippo. I must know.
The selling point, you got to explore the book to find the zombie hippo. And then run like hell because it's going to eat you, probably.
Oh, but they're so friendly, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine a real life hippo is dangerous enough, honestly.
Well, exactly. Yeah,
an alive
they're
hippo.
Not friendly critters.
Yeah, they're grumpy. But what were you saying?
So, so it's getting back to where you're going. What it's about is it's really about having this initial starting point, but then you get to explore and feel some of the risk that's involved. Is, are you going to be eaten? Will you die this way, that way? Can you make it out of the city, or can you find a cure? Those sort of things. So it's as you go along and read, I think you can feel yourself, at that corridor, looking around the corner. It has that sort of feeling in there, and when you're reading a novel, a straight through novel, if you're really close to the character, if it's really well written, you have that sense of imminent danger.
Yes, yes.
And sometimes you have that, no, don't do that. I think we've all watched many a dodgy movie where we've been sitting there going, don't do that. Do not open that door. In this, you can try and open that door and see what happens. Or you go, well, I'm going to try and play it safe. But, of course, in a setting where you don't control everything, what you think is safe and what actually is safe can be two different things. It's about that exploration, but it's about just the fun of feeling that risk, that tension, and especially for the readers, because it's aimed at that 10 plus, 10 to 13 sort of market. But as adults, I think when we're reading it, it's a real fun of going through and going, well, what if I do this? What if I do that? And there's 64 different endings. So,
wow.
You really can just go wild. There's a spot where you can make pizza. And depending on what topping you pick, you will live or die.
Well, that's exciting. This is quite a bit more peril than in your standard pizza. But yeah, pizza making experience in real life, yeah.
Yeah, though I'm sure I've had pizza from some pretty dodgy places where my innards were definitely at risk.
None of it has killed you so far, though.
Not so far.
Or you wouldn't be on the podcast.
Hello, this is Dead Rob standing in.
Ghost of Rob Tillsley. It's on the podcast. But anyway, so we need a Ben Franklin phone for that. Anyway, what was I saying? So as far as this is, how much is this book like a game? Because it's been a long time since I read a game book, since I was a kid. How much is it like a game, and how much of it is a story, I guess, is the real question.
It's a really good question, because I remember not only Choose Your Own Adventure, like you mentioned earlier. I remember Lone Wolf series had some fantastic ones. Fighting Fantasy was another really big one. But what actually got me started on, it's almost what I consider a solo adventure, was the D&D, the Dungeons and Dragons red box set from many decades ago, which had a solo adventure where you would have to work your way through it, and sort of teaching you the rules as you go. What I've done with Brains is to make it so that rather than it being like a mechanical thing where there are rules and things for you to follow, it's just making the decisions. That's all you have to do. Flick to the right section, or if you're on the ebook, click the right link to get to that spot. But whereas some of the ones that I remember as a kid, there wasn't a lot of character arc. There wasn't a lot of sort of real complexity behind the storylines. In fact, sometimes they just got quite bizarre for the sake of being bizarre. What I really tried to do was to make sure that there are emotional points within the story. Like there's one particularly tough decision around the Hippo area. Yes, I'm going to call it the Hippo area, where you have to make a really tough moral decision, and it's not. It doesn't beat you around the head if you make what I might consider the right or wrong decision. It's just there are implications, and so and that's what I try to build in there so that you get to play and explore, but not. Whereas in just a board game, you go through, you finish the thing, and there you go. But this has enough story within it, enough what I put into the novels that I write, that you still get, some character experience, which I think just especially can do something that's got scary bits and desperate bits. If it's going to pull on your heartstrings, it's got to get you to those tough points. And it's got to feel emotional as opposed to, you just gaming out what the best options are.
Yes.
So I've really tried to make it, very story driven.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, it kind of reminds me. I mean, in concept, these books kind of remind me of the old adventure games like King's Quest, that kind of stuff that I've heard about.
Oh yes, the sort of pseudo 3D, but not really, just 2D, where you're going up and down on the screen, and you type in some commands. Police Quest was one of my favorite ones from back in the day.
The pointing click adventures or the text adventures. Yeah.
Yes. Maniac Mansion. Okay, you're seriously taking me down memory lane here. I had a computer which had a whole 4 colors on the screen at once. CGA, that technology was called. It was absolutely not top of the line.
But it's funny because I haven't played many of those games myself. Though I did have, like I said, I have read a few game books in my time, played a few game books. But the main one actually kind of reminds me of the Warhammer 40,000 of these dual books where you each have a book and you'd pick and then you can pair what each other picked because you'd have 2 players to be a duel between characters. So you'd have a character's book. And then they would correspond, and then you'd pick, and you'd have a table, and it'd tell you where you were going, and you could play against people. But basically, it was the same kind of idea. Otherwise, it was just
I like that.
an opposition
version. Concept.
Yeah. I don't know where they got to. They should still be around here somewhere, but it's weird. Those were so goofy. I'd play those with my brothers anyway.
It is funny though. You'll have all these great things from when you're younger, and I don't know if this parents secretly throw things away, but just somehow all the wonderful detritus of our childhood just sort of slowly vanishes away to going, where's my Lego?
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, if you looked around this room, all the accretion of all the crap I had in here is pretty huge. But it's not the only things that I had, and some of the stuff that I remember most fondly, I cannot find, which is kind of funny.
Yeah,
and that's basically what you're describing there. Yeah.
Sometimes though, that might be better. Like the nostalgia can be wonderful, and sometimes if we actually look back and check what it was like, it's not quite as good as we remember.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, back to the storytelling and stuff. So when you write a book like this, you write a game book. What kind of, because you've written novels and you've written both for children and for adults, but what's the difference? What kind of target audience were you going for with this book? Is one big question. Let's start there.
Yeah. So my sort of basic rule for when I'm doing something that's aimed at a younger audience is essentially what I 10 plus, but that could mean like a good 9-year-old reader. But I tend to focus on kids who they're past what most middle grade books are, which is quite simple language, quite simple plots. Often, I don't want to trash on middle grade because it's important and it's just brilliant books in that area. But you get kids who they're just ready for that little bit more in complexity, but they're not ready for all of the topics that are in YA. All the sex and excessive death. Wait, I know. I've written a book about zombies, but some of the death sort of stuff and drugs and the relationship sort of things at that level. So I tend to like to write for that 10 to 13 year old audience, and as well as that age bracket, I try and make it so that it's not a boys or a girls book. The Susie Steele's that I've been writing. Yes, I wrote them for my daughter because girls often don't have action main character books. It's just not as common. But boys should be reading that anyway, as far as I'm concerned. I don't write it so that someone of a particular gender would be going, is this for me? Is this not for me? I want them all be in there. So Brains is very carefully tailored so that given that you are the main character, because in these books, you are the main character, the person who's reading it. Your gender doesn't come into it. And there's little details around your background where you have to tailor it very much so that you're just touching on the lightest little bits so that you don't clash too much with people's own backgrounds. So, I'm from Australia, but someone who's in America or UK or, an English reader in Germany should be able to read the book and still feel it's for them, that the city to some extent or another is a place they recognize. But then, because it's a zombie apocalypse, there's definitely death. And some gory death and things like that, but it's all I've carefully written it so that it's can still have some impact, but isn't the sort of thing that would hopefully give people nightmares for the next 10 years.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not like having watched it at 10 years old.
Right.
It shouldn't carry quite that level of trauma.
Yeah, you're kind of. What this kind of reminds me of, what the age range you were talking about, kind of reminds me of some of the dark works of, what is it, Robin Jarvis? Yeah, if you've ever heard of Robin Jarvis, like Tales from the Word Museum, The Deptford Mice. This is stuff that I read when I was probably, I forget when exactly, but I was reading this as a kid. These books, and actually Death Scent is my favorite. But that one, as it might imply, these are all basically middle grade books. They don't have any of the YA like advanced stuff, but they're also extremely dark. In fact, I mean, there's then the Deptford Mice is anthropomorphic, well, not really anthropomorphic, but mice that have to deal with like demons and stuff, basically. It's quite scary.
That sounds fantastic.
They're great books.
You're touching on the right sort of stuff, and that's like not for every kid. And this is why librarians and parents and all that come in. But often we set expectations that kids are not able to cope with things that they are able to cope with. That kids often will jump up to books with perhaps topics they're not quite ready for because the things that are at their age level as such don't actually get as dark or as powerful as they're ready for.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't mind me saying, that reminds me that I very strongly, but the brain's the kind of concept of the genre reminds me very strongly, and I want to kind of give a plug for this book because it's pretty old, but it must be 20 years old now, but it's a good one, and it's the first Word Museum book, which the title actually escapes me because I wasn't prepared for this, but it's the first book from the Tales from the Word Museum. It's weird with the Y, WYRD,
okay,
and it involves time travel where the characters are sent back to the Blitz during World War II in London.
Ooh,
and then there are demons involved there too. There are demon Nazis consorting with demons and stuff like that, and it's just an extremely dark book. But one of the main characters is he's like a soul of an airman who'd been infused into a teddy bear. He's one of the guys. And I guess I am going somewhere with this because like in Death Scent, there's this character who's basically an alien in this extremely weird kind of steampunk or steampunk fantasy setting, steampunk England, that is also a sci-fi setting in a very real way. But then there's these characters that are very but they're adults basically. The airman guy, he's an adult. He's in the body of a teddy bear, but he's an adult, and he's kind of the hero of that book in a way. Same with the alien Brindle in Death Scent. He's kind of the hero character, but these guys, and this is kind of getting away from the game book thing, just going to middle grade in general. It's interesting that these guys, they're not the protagonist. They're not the hero, but they are the hero. Does that make sense? Right? They're not the point of view character. The point of view character is a kid in both these books.
Well, that's one of the things sort of that shifted in middle grade was a shift to a belief that that kids don't want to read about adults, that they want to read about kids. And I think there's some truth to that, because obviously people like to identify it quite often, but I think it's also overdone. It's like the character has to be just like me. It's like, no, they don't. You just need to have a good story. I mean, look at Doctor Who.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Kids show still is a kids show, even though there are many of us who are much older that watch it. And you've got adults everywhere.
Yeah, the main character is a Time Lord. He's immortal, basically. He's lived many lifetimes, but it's still a kid protagonist. It's great.
Yeah, and you've got moral quandaries everywhere. You've got death everywhere. Actually, as a lover of Doctor Who, I suppose that is probably a big influence for me, because yes, it's that kids don't need to be babied the whole time. You don't have to, just throw them into the fire, but you don't have to baby them either.
Right. No, that makes sense. I kind of, it's been a while since I actually thought about, what I would read as a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old or whatever. But other than like Harry Potter, which was coming out when I was that age, and those things I mentioned before, most of the early books were not. I don't remember the books didn't have at least a little darkness to them. Maybe that's just me, but I tend to I forget the stuff. Yeah, exactly. A little edge, right?
And even the Bridge to Terabithia.
Oh God!
Which was made into a movie recently. Recently,
a few years ago now.
That long ago, a few years ago now. But there was a pretty heavy dark topic in there. And that had a major impact. It took me ages to work out whether or not I liked the book or not, but it was very well crafted, and boy, it hit you.
Right, that one hit me too hard. That's why I still don't like that book.
That's the nature of that. But I think sometimes it does show that sort of it's easy for us to just be a little too gentle.
Right.
But you still got to get it right, and that's I had my children beta testers to make sure that that I was hitting the mark with this.
Okay.
Because it's if you're going to die 30 times, and there are some really cool positive endings, and some of them are they're just remarkably different from each other. But if you are going to die, sometimes it's fun to go, oh wow, that's how I died, as opposed to, oh my god, that's how I died.
Oh yeah. Sometimes you die in a cool way, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
When it's exciting.
There needs to be some enjoyment in that death, especially given you can immediately flick back and try something different. Right.
Yeah, so and this book's going to be out. This book is out in ebook and print, right now. I mean, by the time this episode drops, I think
so. This book would have been out many months earlier if it was only in ebook. But it must be said, it's. I don't know if there's a lot of other books in the genre that are out in ebook, because you have to get all the linking structure to work, hyperlinks.
Yes.
Yes, you can make people just jump to the table of contents and flick, but that's not going to be pleasant on an e-reader. So
exactly, and then you got to scroll down and find the one, and then click on that. No, that'd be no good.
Yeah. So it's all built in with the hyperlinks. So unless anyone's got some really obscure, weird device that's not using all the reasonable standards that are around these days. Should, fingers crossed, work with all the internal hyperlinks, and you can just jump around and jump back to the previous decision, jump back to the start, which is quite nice. And then there's the print version, both of which have a whole bunch of interior art in there, which I love. I love my zombie otter. I love... Yes, there are a few different zombie creatures. I'm just giving spoilers left, right, and center.
No big deal. No big deal.
There's a wonderful...
They're selling points, not spoilers at this point.
There's this wonderful little silhouette of this helicopter above a building, and zombies just chasing you off the edge and falling off the edge of the building, which I just, I don't know. It makes me chuckle. It shouldn't, but it does. Just getting all those details and getting it nice. And of course, because it's not a straight read through, everything has to be randomized in the placement. So that, but once, because page 30 might take you to page 150.
Yeah.
And then back to, page 75. So there's a lot of technical things involved in just making sure it all comes out right. That's required a lot of prep early on in terms of all the software just to track what's doing what.
Yeah, no kidding.
But yes, so all that happens, and it is finally, I think it'll be out by the time anyone hears this, so April the 23rd.
Yeah, definitely. This show comes out in a few days after that, yeah.
Yeah.
So excellent. And but right now we want to turn, we were talking a little about reading before, but I want to ask you about if you have any reading recommendations for us today, Rob.
Yeah. So one of the things I find myself doing a fair bit of reading of middle grade books, just because it's they can be just good fun. Even as an adult, you'll be surprised if you go and read some of the middle grade stuff. It's going to be really well done. One which I've been going through recently is the Enola Holmes that were also turned. Well, one of them, the first one's been turned into a Netflix movie. Really well written, really interesting when you get that sort of mixture of slightly historical nature, but not 100% putting you into the strict formality that would have been there. So they sort of play with it. It doesn't. There's nothing in there that knocks me out of the era, but it's not as dry as certain books like that could be. It's also quite different to the movie. If you saw the Enola Holmes movie and it's your sort of thing, I do recommend checking out the book as well, just because it's a different experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like so many books are very different from the movie adaptation. It's interesting how it goes.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that's a good thing because you can do different things, and there's no point getting hung up. Like a movie adaptation obviously can sometimes just be awful because they've made an awful movie, but to complain that it's not exactly the same as a book is to miss the point of a different medium.
Exactly. Obviously, I think it's funny because a lot of kids are like this, where it wasn't exactly like the book. There were so many problems with it because it wasn't the book. But if you want the book, just read the book again. Sorry.
Yeah,
and if you can't get the same experience in the book twice, then maybe you're lucky you read it one time. How about that?
I think the problem is, like, anytime someone reads a book, they get their own experience.
Yes.
The description, no matter how much someone writes into it, will be what the person creates inside their own head. And so, if you had 1 billion readers, you're going to end up with 1 billion different versions.
Mm-hmm.
So the movie could never be all those things.
Good point. Well, as for this show, I do have one recommendation from me for books. Actually, this isn't even a recommendation. Just a reading log, basically. I have this collection of old H.P. Lovecraft stories, and I read the first one in that, which was The Outsider, which is... No, the first one, I actually think the first one might be it was one I'd already read. It was the Statement of Randolph Carter, which is a good little story. For a Lovecraft tale anyway. But the Outsider was actually surprisingly good. Nice little kind of parable science fiction story about a character that's never seen another human who crawls up from somewhere unspecified. Anyway, it's open public domain, so people should read that one if they can stomach the writing style. There's nothing overtly racist in that one, as far as I could see, and there's not a lot of though I did skim parts because there was a lot of description. So let's be fair. There's a lot. So the writing style wise, I can't. Style wise, I can't recommend it, but it's an interesting concept, and I liked that one quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil what the ending was like. Yeah.
My Lovecraft experiences were sort of more through the Call of Cthulhu role playing game.
That's where my first one was too, actually.
Yeah, it takes some of the historical dodginess, the rough edges, and gives you a chance to sort of explore the world in a slightly more pleasant, horribly unpleasant world.
Exactly, and also because if you're playing a role playing game, and I guess this is one question to go out on here about brains too. But when you're playing a role playing game or playing any kind of game, there's a level of fun to it. There's just kind of like you're gonna laugh at stuff, and it's gonna be enjoyable, at least if the game is doing its job. So, do you think that that's an element in a game book like Brains? I guess because I find a lot of the humor in, say, an RPG comes from the group you're playing with. Do you think that is the kind of experience you could have with that book, though? Yeah,
it is, because that's by there being so many choices, you get to play with the ideas, and I think that brings its own fun. Obviously, you're never going to be able to sort of bounce off of someone else, but in this day and age, it's so hard for kids and adults to actually catch up with each other anyway. Mm-hmm. So in this, you get to there's different friendship groups that, depending on what decisions you make, you can be part of. And so you get to play with those relationships, but you don't even have to leave the house or leave quarantine which, as I understand, over there, I'm quarantined in Australia in the sense of we're not allowed to leave the country, but that just might be the rest of the world telling us to go away.
Yeah, same here.
But yeah, it is. It's the different choices, all that. It's meant to be fun, even as it's meant to be a little bit scary.
Excellent.
And I suppose that's really up to the readers to tell me whether or not I've achieved that, but I certainly hope I did.
Well, wonderful. It's been great catching up with you, Rob. Tell people where they can find the book and your other stuff out there.
Cheers, thanks. So, yeah, all the usual bookstores. Amazon, I think, is putting it up live as we speak, so it will certainly be available there. All the usual ebook retailers. This one is wide. A lot of, if you're an ebook reader, my Rebirth, Susie Steele books, and my adult sci-fi, The Last Cruise Ship, are all on Kindle Unlimited. But this one, because of the nature of the way the hyperlinking and all that works, we didn't want to tickle the Amazon system into thinking that we were doing something dodgy. So
that could be a problem.
That one is nicely wide. So if you're not an Amazon fan or you have a different preference, hopefully they'll all be live by the time people are listening to this. Otherwise, my website's blacksskybooks.com, and R Max Tillsley for all your Facebooks, Instagrams, Twitters. And I'm too old for TikTok. I'm sorry. I'm just too old for it.
You don't have to apologize. I'm too old for TikTok, dude. I'm too old for TikTok. TikTok is for kids. I feel like
get off my lawn.
Oh yeah, we're gonna be kicking the kids out of the yard any minute now. No, especially since now the show is basically wrapping up. We don't have to worry about this middle grade stuff for a while, perhaps. I mean, actually, I don't know. Who knows what the next guest will bring? But thanks. And I mean, I like middle grade. I mean, I like that kind of thing. I mean, I haven't read one in a long time because they age a lot. People progress out of that a little more strongly, I think, than young adult. But
they do, but
this is a game book. This is not the same.
Like if you want to eat popcorn, right? Yeah, because it's just something nice and calm. Mm-hmm. Try reading a good quality middle grade.
Okay.
And just see, you might find that's your popcorn.
Okay, well, I'll definitely keep that in mind. And thank you for interrupting my flow there. But it's okay. That's what you're here for. Excellent. If it was just me babbling, no one would tune into this show. But so anyway, people, thanks for listening. You can find more about us at mentalcellularpublications.com. You can find my books on amazon.com. And you can find my print books now wherever fine print-on-demand books can be found. Pretty much. Anywhere Drafty Digital distributes to. Sorry, no, they don't sponsor the show, but I do enjoy their service, and their print versions are actually really quality. So definitely check out my books wherever you can find them. Demon Scroll is the first book in the Demon Hunter series, which already has 3 books, and there's going to be another one out sometime soon because I couldn't get out of that world, which is probably a good sign. So thanks for listening, everybody, and stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon.
That tears it.